Tech startups have long been viewed as the preserve of only the richest countries. Indeed, data shows that the likes of Silicon Valley, Boston and New York in the US, London and Berlin in Europe, and Hong Kong in Asia remain in a league of their own when it comes to catalyzing venture capital, that is VC investment. However, new waves of tech entrepreneurship are mounting way beyond those powerhouses. While VC investment in Africa still represents a drop in the global investment ocean, the continent, which is the youngest and fastest urbanizing region in the world, is one of the most entrepreneurial regions on the planet. The African Development Bank reported that 22% of Africa's working age population are starting businesses, the highest rate of entrepreneurship in the world. This entrepreneurial spirit is propelling a wave of tech startups across the continent, with major focus falling on the country's largest, or rather the continent's largest economy, Nigeria. The country topped all locations for a number of startups, with many of them operating within the fintech sector, taking advantage of the under-provision of banking services in the country. Although Lagos is renowned for its startup ecosystem, there is a significant disconnect between the city's tech ecosystem, its surroundings, and the wider country, which suffers from poor infrastructure and education and reoccurring political instability and security issues. But now Nigeria is taking spaces and time to create a framework for a startup ecosystem. The Nigeria Startup Bill has been sent to the National Assembly by President Muhammadu Buhari and aims to enable the sector to grow and attract more investment. Despite the country's infrastructure and regulation failing to keep up with the rate of disruption by the tech industry, Nigeria has produced 2 homegrown unicorns, that is, businesses valued at over $1 billion. And Nigeria has also acted as a crucial market for 5 of Africa's unicorns as well. Today, the focus is on Nigeria's proposed startup bill. This is Business Edge. I'm Tolulope Adeleru Balogun. And joining me today is Nosike Inwegene. He's a communications specialist and a member of the communications team working directly on the Nigeria Startup Bill. Nosike, welcome to Business Edge. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Hi, Tolu. It's good to be here.
So let's start with a bit of background, because when you look at the things and how the startup ecosystem in Nigeria has gone and grown, many say it has happened in spite and despite government regulations or a lack of government support and intervention. How did the industry manage to grow as much as it has? And was there any form of support, any form of recognition for the ecosystem before the startup bill came into the conversation?
I mean, I can't speak to deliberate support, but a couple of factors have led to where we are today, fueled by ongoing investments in digital infrastructure, mobile penetration, increasing mobile penetration, internet penetration. You find that everyone next to you has access to the internet. That spurs a lot of activity and obviously provides a market for tech solutions. And now we're in times where things need to be fixed, and we have people with the talent and the wherewithal to do so using innovative tech solutions. So think fintech, edtech, health tech, and whatnot. So a couple of factors led us to where we are today. And once again, you said in your introduction that it has happened in spite of deliberate government support. And where we are now with this is, if this happened in spite of how we got here, so what's going to happen once we have a regulatory framework that makes it easier for tech founders, the entire ecosystem to do work in partnership with the government, work better with the government.
All right. Is there a particular reason why it seems the bill is necessary at this point in time, in the timeline or in the evolution of Nigeria's tech ecosystem particularly? Because with this conversation on startups, a lot of the focus is on the tech startups that we're seeing come across here in Nigeria and across the continent as well. Why now?
Nigerian startups African startups raised $5 billion or thereabouts, just above that last year, and Nigerian startups did about a fifth of that. So Nigeria is essentially the tech hub, Lagos, if you will, for startup growth on the continent. It makes sense for the Nigerian government to bet on this growth and create frameworks or institute frameworks that make it easier for this to keep growing exponentially, supporting talent, employment, fixing solutions, so helping the government to also support and fix solutions, payments, and once again, health tech and whatnot. So it makes sense that the government cashes in now, bets on the ecosystem now, and support it to grow better.
So for many in Nigeria and probably around the continent, when you hear regulation and bills and legislation, it raises concerns. And there are a number of concerns that people have really spoken about when it comes to the Nigeria startup bill. So those concerns, of course, are around why government is coming in now. Is this a revenue drive that government is coming into in the long run, rather than something that's collaborative that would help the growth of the industry? What do you say to that?
These concerns are justified. It isn't the first time this sort of thing has happened. But in this case, we have some of the ecosystems top people and government top people working together who believe that this is the real deal. This can work. And if we have a collaborative effort between the ecosystem players and the respective government agencies responsible for this sector, we can create an environment where everyone wins. It's government is justified in trying to, protect the country's interests and regulate. And of course, you have to do it in a way that you don't stifle innovation. So it makes everyone is on the same page. It makes sense for us to work together to make this happen.
So, Nosike, are you sure that everyone is on the same page? So you talked about it being a collaboration, and some of the players involved in this involve right now the Central Bank of Nigeria. But let's look at a few things that the Central Bank has done in recent times that have raised some concerns or red flags for people. The Central Bank is the same CBN which just last year banned cryptocurrency transactions, which was just 5 months after the Securities Exchange Commission, another government regulatory agency, actually recognized cryptos and declared the intention to regulate the space. It was also the CBN that froze the accounts of Shaka, Bamboo, and RiseVest just after SEC had also announced a new license category for digital sub-brokers, and Shaka had gotten one of those licenses. These are already two players in a regulatory space who obviously were not on the same page concerning some of these issues. So is everyone really on the same page?
That's what we're here for to begin with, is to make sure everyone's on the same page. The Nigerian government agencies can be fragmented in decision making. It's not peculiar to the tech sector, right? But we're in a unique position now where we say, listen, all these players, all these tech startups are trying to offer innovative solutions, right? And we need even the government, all these government agencies to come together to be on the same page with regards to regulation. So in other words, with respect to tech startup regulation, for example, you would want NIDA, CBN, and you mentioned SEC, for example, to have the same outlook with regards, regulations and policy for these startups and the ecosystem at large. So, they're all part of the process in drafting the bill, suggestions, if you will. So the work we're doing is to make sure that eventually that stops. What the instances you mentioned don't happen again. And we hope that will be the case going forward. Once, they said, sorry, you were saying.
No, go ahead, finish your thoughts.
No, once the Senate considers it, and then we move on to the next stage.
All right. So before we go for a break, let's also talk about this as a federal legislative act, and that's what it is, or that's what it aims to be. The president has passed it to the Senate as of late 2021, and we're waiting to hear back from the National Assembly. But this is also one of the issues Nigeria has when it comes to legislation. There's beautiful legislation at the federal level, but when it comes to implementation and when it comes to the interaction of this legislation at the state level, there are definitely issues. And we know that it can be difficult implementing federal laws at the state level. So what's the conversation involving the states, especially when you see a situation that happened like the one in Lagos, when the state banned motorcycle hailing platforms, which is something that you expect to see more of when this ecosystem continues to boom. So are the states on the same page with the federal government? What's the conversation as well to making sure that the startup bill doesn't just stay at this federal level and it's able to really trickle down into the areas that it needs to?
Oh, precisely. So before we go to this point, there have been dozens of town hall engagement within the ecosystem on state levels, across states. Some of the team who aren't on this call right now have been to Anambra, have been to, I mean, I don't call it any states, but, they've been far and wide. And on a local level, they've discussed with local government chairmen, they've discussed with state members of the record and gotten a sense of where everyone is. And also they've sought to, be inclusive in the process, right? So no, the work has been done on not just the federal, but on the state grassroots level as well. The point being that the idea rather being that when all of this is done, when it's transmitted to the lower houses for concurrence, it sails smoothly. And don't forget, once it gets to the state houses, for concurrence. The state executives are aware, and they're also it also enables them, right, informs them, and to create an environment for the startup ecosystems to grow.
All right, so we're going to take a break here. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the thorny issues that came up because of the National Information Technology Development Agency. Also talk about the players outside of government who are involved in putting this bill together. And of course, what exactly is going to be a startup? What incentives, tax breaks, what conversations are happening around the Nigeria startup bill? So it was, Nosike, so just hold the line. I'll be right back after this. We're taking a look at Nigeria's proposed startup bill. And of course, with regulation, not just here in Nigeria, but around the continent, people have their hackles up and their eyes really checking to see if it is regulation that will enable the environment or regulation that might stifle the growth. We'll see how this turns out right after the break. Still with me is Nosike Ingwegene. He's a communications specialist and one of the insiders working on the Nigeria Startup Bill. Now, we also have to take a look at the National Information Technology Development Agency in the context of this conversation. In August of 2021, supposed amendments to the NIDA Act leaked. And while the provisions got the most attention already exist, the supposed amendments were to give the ICT regulator enough powers to implement sanctions when needed. And there were issues with those sanctions. There are so many different players in this space right now, and I think let's get to that part of the conversation. So, Nosike, who exactly is involved in drafting this bill? Are the industry players having their concerns and their voices heard as we are now? At this point, it's a little late because, of course, the bill has been transmitted to the National Assembly, but were they actively involved in the drafting of this regulation?
Oh yeah, definitely. We've had so we have the Presidential Advisory Group for startups, I believe, and it's made up of quality players in the system far and wide. They've also been collaborating with MDAs. In fact, the second step in the path for the NSB to become a law was a bill validation session with MDAs. So every single ministry, departmental agency that has anything remotely to do with the Nigeria's tech ecosystem was in play and was involved in the bill and the process. In fact, that happened before we got to the town hall engagement phase of the bill. So yes, every single player involved in the tech ecosystem from the government side did work on the bill. And at the conclusion, once this bill is passed, they will also be part of and let me say enforcing it and maintaining it, right? So yes, there's inclusion in all parts.
So do you really think that this one act, the Nigeria Startup Bill, which we assume will likely pass into legislation, can really harmonize the fragmented regulatory structure that surrounds the startup ecosystem, that surrounds small business ecosystem, that surrounds the ICT sector inside Nigeria? Can this one bill sort of harmonize and bring everything together so that we have a direction going forward?
I mean, we're optimistic, and if we didn't think it would, we wouldn't be working so hard to make this pass. So this bill caters to a council for digital innovation and entrepreneurship, a startup support and engagement portal platform, startup labeling. That way we can properly label what a startup is, right? An investment fund for startups. This will be managed by the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority to provide early stage startups with finance, tax and fiscal incentives for labeled startups and investors, startup employees, and service providers of said startups, regulatory support, so that startups and new startups especially can interface smoothly with relevant government agencies, such as SEC and CAC, for example, and supporting innovation parks, hubs, and technology development zones, and also building training, because of a big part of this is growing talent, right? The
Yeah.
talent required to support these startups. That's development talent, communications, marketing, growth. It's across board. So this also creates jobs as well. And that's really fascinating aspect for a country that has a young population. Our ultimate goal, right, is that we get everyone on the same page and that we all work together to make all of this happen. If we started by agreeing that the ecosystem has gotten this far without deliberate government support, imagine what we could do if we had the government on our side.
So under this bill, who is a startup? What qualifies a company or an enterprise to be labeled as a startup? Will there be some kind of seed funding? Because we know that financial funding is a massive issue for many of the startups on the continent, of course, helping them to scale and even widen their reach as well. So give me an answer to all of that.
Okay, so first with funding, right? Okay, so first let me start with labeling, right? One of the sections I mentioned earlier is the startup labeling. This will define the legal requirements and entity must fulfill, to be defined as a startup. And when that happens, then all the other benefits accrued to startups and all will get to that startup. For funding, startup founders typically fund by bootstrapping or outside investment. But our hope is that the government, through vehicles such as the NSIA, can place some seed funding in some of these startups if they believe in ideas. So just like any other venture capitalist or private equity organization would. Startups are okay. Back to the definition for startups. As generally acceptable is fast-growing companies whose business models are tech-enabled and who use these tech-enabled and innovative solutions to solve day-to-day problems for the daily Nigerian.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned tax incentives and you mentioned, of course, some kind of, I guess, protections maybe for the pioneers
Yeah.
of this particular industry. Take us into that a little bit more, because sort of having legislation that formalizes these incentives, these breaks they may have, and even protections is something that's very good for the industry. So what can pioneers of this industry in Nigeria expect from the bill?
Is an easier space to operate.
Yes, in terms of pioneer status and maybe what they might get for, you mentioned employees and also service providers for,
Exactly.
yes.
Exactly. A lot of these guys put in work, and it's a harsh environment. It can be a harsh environment to work in, right? And what all of this does is smooths it over and makes it easier. So a lot of times, a lot of startup founders will tell you that their major problem, right, the major barrier for their work is regulations, right,
Yes.
regulations and policies. Before, maybe even before funding, allow me to say. So what observers can expect is, in fact, let me just say, ease of doing business, right? Yeah, it makes it easier for them to operate. It makes it easier for them to start up. If you have to go to the CAC, I mean, you're going to the protection of the startup bill. You don't have to go through the typically rigorous process to set up your company. And don't forget, a lot of these startup founders are young 23, 25-year-old. It's really hard for them to navigate bureaucracy. And what this does is make it easier for them to do so.
But is it possible to make it easier for tech startups to start doing business and you still have a wider contextual conversation about how it is not easy to actually do business or start business in Nigeria? How can we separate that?
Yeah, I totally agree. Even as a Nigerian, I ask those questions. But I'm going to say this as an individual. I do hope that this trickles down to the overall business landscape, right? Because it is hard to do business in Nigeria by any measure. And the current administration has talked about ease of doing business. Talked about us moving up in the index and making it easier for general entrepreneurs as a whole to provide value and make money. So I do hope that, the startup build is start of something great for the larger business landscape.
All right, so Nosike, as we wrap up now, we know that the president has sent the bill to the National Assembly. Take us through the next few steps that we're anticipating. Are there timelines and dates to this? Of course, the first reading, second reading, public hearings as well. What do we expect in the coming weeks?
I don't want to jump the gun and give timelines. That would be, that would be wrong with me. But it's the National Assembly now for consideration. And the hope is that it scales through these processes and gets voted on and it does get passed and then transmitted to the state houses for concurrence, right? Which is what we spoke about earlier. I can't speak to timelines; that would be premature. We do hope that it moves on as quickly as possible, especially since we're about to enter election season, and the people working on this right now are seeking re-election and probably working to get re-elected by the electorate.
All right, so we'll be seeing how things play out, because a lot of people are actually very happy with this regulation and happy with those involved. And there are still, of course, concerns given some of Nigeria's regulatory history. But this could be one piece of regulation that truly does what it's meant to do. So we'll be seeing how it all plays out.
Oh yeah, definitely. We're really optimistic. We hope it pans out, and it brings more jobs. It increases our relevance because of. Don't forget, Nigeria's tech industry growth is good for Nigeria as a whole, right? For foreign policy and whatnot. So we're really glad that we're playing our bit to grow the country, and we hope that everyone involved in this, puts maximum effort to make it work.
All right, Nosike, thank you so much for joining me. I know we'll be touching base as things move along with the bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. And as my guest said, the startup ecosystem, not just here in Nigeria, but across the continent, has grown massively, about $5 billion. That's as much as we got, but this ecosystem can definitely get a lot more. If you're interested in the tech ecosystem in Nigeria, just go to our YouTube page. We spoke to Bridges Analyzing Company, and they've spoken about the growth of the tech ecosystem across the continent, and that's definitely a conversation you want to check out. But you're watching Business Edge, and up next is NC4 to watch. And we start with a conversation for stories based on energy. As we look at the stories we're keeping our eyes on, Principal Analyst Benjamin Atia for Wood Mackenzie Limited said in research issued by the UK-based energy and consultancy business that investment prospects get around some of sub-Saharan Africa's state utility, economic and operational limitations. He says service providers are focusing on the bankable sectors of residential, commercial, and industrial power consumption, often through distributed, renewable, off-grid solutions that do not rely on the public utility. According to data from Uganda's Electricity Regulatory Authority, electricity distribution businesses lost roughly 169 megawatts every 3 months that go unsold. The ERA Electricity Distribution Statistics Report states that for the quarter ending September 2021, power firms bought 1,108 megawatts from generating companies, but only sold 897 megawatts. The Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, as well as the Federal Ministry of Mines and Steel Development, have urged stakeholders and financial institutions to invest more in Nigeria's mining sector in order to unlock the country's non-oil economic potential and strengthen the country's export capacity. Olamilekan Adebite, the Minister of Mines and Steel Development, said the mining industry has been overlooked in the discussion about reducing Nigeria's reliance on oil and gas. Oil prices extended their rally on Friday at the end of a third volatile week of trade after slim progress in peace talks between Russia and Ukraine raised the specter of tighter sanctions and a prolonged disruption to oil supply. Brent crude futures jumped to $109.39 a barrel after surging nearly 9% on Thursday in the largest percentage gain since mid-2020. U.S. WTI crude futures climbed to $105.91 a barrel, adding to an 8% jump on Thursday. And that's the show we have for you today. Follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, download our mobile app, and of course, watch us on any of the platforms we are available. We have an appointment, me and you, 11 a.m. West African time, starting on Monday, as we take a look at African business, the economy, and finance. I'm Tolulokwe Adeleru Balogun. Do have a fantastic weekend.